Okay, so it's finally time to experience Hadoop hands-on. I will demonstrate all of the required commands right from this terminal window running on my laptop. So the first command that we're going to run is simply downloading Hadoop from the Apache Software Foundation website. The next command will be untarring the content, so we have a copy of it in our local file system. And then the next two commands are basically just setting up a few shell environment variables to make working with Hadoop a little bit easier. So the first one is Hadoop home. This is just to let everybody in Hadoop ecosystem know where to find Hadoop. And the other one will be the path. This is just to make sure that when I run Hadoop commands, I don't have to prefix them with long path names. Now done. Obviously, those four commands will only have to be run for the first time when you're setting up a brand new Hadoop environment. Once you went through them, you don't actually have to rerun them again. Our next step is prepare some test data. So I have a file like this in my local file system. And as you can see, this is basically a comma-separated values file, with first value being a zip code and the next value being the name of the city in California. So there's absolutely nothing special about this temporary file. It is just like any other file on my laptop. Now, the next command that we're going to run is actually special because it will be your first Hadoop command. So make it a special occasion. Pour some nice beer or juice and celebrate. No, I'm just kidding. Let's just run it. Ta-da! That was your first Hadoop command. As you can see, by default, it just prints all of the options it's capable of. And in general, almost all interactions with Hadoop from command line in this tutorial will be done with the help of these three commands. So there's Hadoop, the one we just ran, there's HDFS, and there is yarn. So let's now turn our attention to HDFS, because we have to work with files, so that makes sense. Now, if we just run HDFS like that, it also prints all of the options it's capable of, and there's actually quite a few of them. As you can see, the list is rather long. But the one that we're interested in is called DFS. That's the one that you saw in chapter 3. So let's run the DFS command. Again, it prints a whole bunch of options that it is capable of, so let's take a look. So there's the ones that we saw in chapter 3, like -cat, there is -ls, and a bunch of other useful ones. So now, let's actually do our first HDFS operation. So let's put the temporary file that I showed you into HDFS. But before we do that, let's actually create a folder for that file to exist in HDFS. So we will run HDFS -dfs -mkdir, just like you would run mkdir on your Unix, and we will create a folder name input. All right? Seems like it was successful. Now let's actually put a file from our local file system into HDFS. So let's do this. HDFS dfs-put tmp zip code CSV, and then we will give it a folder in HDFS. Again, another success. So what really happened here? As you remember, we didn't actually do anything special. We didn't start HDFS. I mean, there is no prior HDFS running. In fact, where did the file go? Well, we're actually running in what's known as local mode of Hadoop. So the file actually went into my local file system because in local mode, Hadoop pretends that my local file system is HDFS. And if you don't quite believe me, then let's run a couple of commands that have absolutely nothing to do with Hadoop and are just standard Unix commands. So let's run the first command called ls and just take a look at what's available in my local folder right here, right? Well, what do you know? There is a subfolder called input. So maybe that is the subfolder that HDFS created. So let's look underneath it. Input. And that's exactly right. So the zipcodes.csv file was put there. So running all of those Hadoop commands was basically an elaborate way to copy files, between different locations in my local file system. Why is it still useful? Well, it is useful because it creates a perfect sandbox for you to experiment with Hadoop. And the very same Hadoop commands that work with your local file system in this local mode will have exactly the same effects when you run them on a big cluster. So the local mode is truly Hadoop on training wheels. It's the least amount of resources you need to give to Hadoop to experience all of its command lines. So okay, manipulating files is cool, but since Hadoop is really about processing on top of its storage, how can we actually run any processing in this local mode?